Season Saints, glad you guys have joined us on tonight. We are just so happy that you are here.
They said it was a game.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody have a
members from other congregations. And everyone
It's a pleasure each Wednesday evening to be able to come into the confines of your home and your offices, or wherever you are, to study with us the Word of God. We are always encouraged both by your presence and your participation in these Wednesday night Bible studies of the STONECREST Church of Christ. Thank you so very, very much, and we welcome you and we invite you not only to these studies, but even to our in-person worship services each Sunday morning that begins at 9:30 a.m. So if you're in, as the old folk would say, our neck of the woods on Sunday morning, please drop in, join us, and you'll be so happy that you did. The members of the STONECREST Church are very welcoming, very open, very warm, and we just are thrilled to death when you take out of your time to come and to worship with us. Tonight, I want to begin a two-part study on what I consider as the 4 saddest words recorded in all of the Bible. Listen to me carefully. I want to study with you in my judgment, the four saddest words in all of the Bible. Those words are recorded for us in Matthew chapter 7, beginning at verse number 21, where Jesus, in his very first sermonic presentation on planet Earth, is concluding a sermon, a message, a teaching that started in Matthew chapter 5. Now, you've heard me say on more than one occasion that when the Bible is first written, it's not written in chapters and in verses. When the Bible comes to us, when it is first printed, when it is first made available, it did not have these chapter verse divisions. That's not wrong. It's not unscriptural in any way. It is, in fact, most helpful. But you do need to understand that when it is first printed, it is printed in English, what we simply call paragraph form, with no distinctions in terms or no divisions in terms of chapters and verses. These are later additions to the printing of the Word of God. It was printed that way so you can easily find things in the Bible, as opposed to reading it like a novel where there are limited chapter breaks, but it is just continuous reading. 100 years separated the dividing of the Bible in chapters and then later in verses. Now, again, it helps us to be able to find things in the Bible. I've asked you to turn to the book of Matthew. The chapter is number 7, and the verse is number 21. Now, having said all of that, I need now to remind you that while I'm going to start reading and citing and quoting at Matthew 7 and verse 21 through 23, when I get ready to explain all of this, we've got to go back, if you will, 2 chapters to the end of Matthew chapter 4, and then start reading to bring you up to our passage here in Matthew 7 and verse number 21. But for right now, Matthew 7, 21 reads like this. Remember now, Jesus is about to summarize his first public presentation. I will share with you shortly. He's talking about 2 major things. He's talking about the kingdom of heaven, and he's talking about the righteousness of God. I'm even going to show you a passage where both of those themes are contained in one passage. But for right now, Jesus says, "Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into," get it, "the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father in heaven." And then he goes on to say in the next verse, he says, "And at that day, some will say unto me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name? And in thy name have we not cast out devils? And in thy name have we not performed many miracles?" King James said, many wonderful works. And then Jesus says at verse 23, preaching point for this series. He says, and then I will declare unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, for your work is of iniquity, and your work is of, as I'm reading here tonight from the New American Standard Translation, lawlessness. Now remember what I said I want to talk to you about. I'm only going to tease you with it tonight. I will unpack it in detail the following weeks, but it won't make any sense until we pick up the background and the continuity of the trend of the thought and the two main words that I've already introduced to you, the kingdom of heaven and the righteousness of God. But listen to verse 23 again. When Jesus is describing what's going to happen at that day. When Jesus is describing what's going to happen on that day. The day Jesus is picturing and has in mind is yonder's judgment bar. When folk, he said some people, some religious people are going to stand before him to remind him of what they did in order to get into the kingdom of heaven. Come here. They're going to remind him of what they did to get into the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus is going to declare unto them their non-entrance into the kingdom of heaven because they had not done the will of the Father which is in heaven. Now, let me electric slide. Come on back forward. Walk slowly so you can understand the intent of this text. I want you to watch this. Verse 22, you're going to have some people who are going to remind Jesus of what they did in order to get into the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus' response to them is going to be that they're not going to get into the kingdom of heaven because they had not done the will of the Father which is in heaven. Now, they'll say to him that listen, hey, just go and open up the doors, get my mansion ready, because I prophesied in your name. I've cast out devils in your name. I've done many wonderful works in your name. Listen, open up the door, fit me for my crown, get my robe ready, call the heavenly tailor so he can tailor make my robe. Call whoever you need to call and get my crown fitted for my head. Only to hear 4 sad words. What are those 4 sad words, preacher? They're in the words of our text, where Jesus says, depart from me. Jesus says, depart from me. He says, all those wonderful works that you did, he says they were of, watch this, iniquity. Is a word that means without authority. Wait a minute. it couldn't be without authority. Come on, Brother B. Because the previous verse says that they're going to say to Jesus, in your name. In other words, by your authority. We prophesied, by your authority. We cast out devils. By your authority. We did many wonderful works. Jesus says, I'm going to declare unto them, depart from me. Your work is of iniquity. In other words, it did not have my approval. It did not have my authority. It did not have my sanction. What you thought you were doing was lawful. Jesus called it lawlessness. Oh, my friends, we need to hear this. And watch this. On top of all of that, Jesus says, I never knew you. Four of the saddest words of the Bible is to live your life thinking that what you are doing is the will of God. Thinking that you are headed to the kingdom of heaven. Thinking that God approves of what you are doing, of how you are living. On your way to that day, and here's the sad thing about it, people won't know it until that day. You've been shouting in church. You've been amening in church. You've been in these Bible studies on Wednesday night. You've been in church services on Sunday morning. You've been singing songs. You've been praying prayers. You've been giving of the resources that God gave to you. You've been communing. You've been living your life thinking that you're pleasing God. And you're going to find out, listen to this, too late. That's the sad part about it. You're going to find, people are going to discover too late that they had not done the will of the Father. Therefore, they cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. And then on top of all of that, they're going to hear God say, they're going to hear Jesus say, listen to the words, I never knew you. Not, I don't remember you. Not, I forgot you. Not, you don't come to my memory. He says, I'm going to declare, I never knew you. Now, you're going to have to think deeply with me here, because one of the things I want to share with you in the weeks to come, I want to challenge a theological damnable doctrine that's being taught in and out of the church. In theological language, it's called open theism. Theos is the word for God. Open theism is the teaching that there are some things that God doesn't know. And this text is used as proof text to postulate that theological position. Say God doesn't know everything. Number one, here's an indication right there where God says, I never knew you. So there's some stuff God doesn't know. I'm going to explain that in the weeks to come. This is why we've got to go all the way back to Matthew chapter 4 and get us some context of what's being said here in this particular text. But now I want you to watch this. This notion of open theism will suggest to you that providence is outside of the range of God's knowledge. God doesn't know everything that's going to happen out there in the future. God knows it at the time that it occurs. Well, ain't but one thing wrong with that teaching. Just one thing wrong with it. It ain't right. But then how do we square that? How do we balance that? How do we understand that with one of three prominent attributes and characteristics of God? God is omnipresent. That means God is present everywhere at the same time. God is omnipotent. That means God is all powerful. It takes God no more effort to create a universe than it does for him to create a gnat. He's all powerful. Some folks say, well, man, God can't be all powerful, because if God is all powerful, then why can't God stop the COVID-19 virus that started 3 years ago, and it has metastasized into Omicron, into Delta, and now the monkeys now done got into it. We now got monkeypox. Well, I'm not trying to be facetious. I am reporting the facts of the news. But I want you to watch this, friends. That has nothing to do with the power of God. I'll explain in the weeks to come. And then I want you to watch this. God is not only omnipresent, and God is not only omnipotent. Here's the omni that the question of the text now has to address. God is omniscient. That means God is all-knowing. Ooh-wee. Since God is all-knowing, then how can God then say, I never knew you? How can God say to some people who claim to do stuff in his name, by his authority, God says to them, I don't know you. In fact, I never knew you. How can an all-knowing God say to some people, I never knew you? Or you all are sure asking some good questions at home that we're going to answer next week and in the weeks to come. Now, I want you to watch this. I want to, now that I've set it up, now that I've teed it up for you, now we got to get it down the fairway, onto the green, into the hole. You see that golf is on my mind up in here tonight, since I've not been able to play in it because of my bad back and my sciatic nerve, but it's on my mind, all right? So y'all pray for the brother, all right? Now, I want you to watch this. I want you to watch this. I want to tell you a story of how sad it is to get to a destination only to be told you can't come up in here. I've shared it with you before at STONECREST Church. Let me remind our larger audience about the story. 1988, Dr. Billy Curl, who's a longtime minister for the Crenshaw Church of Christ in Los Angeles, California, now serves that church as one of his elders. 1988, Billy having served as a missionary in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for almost 10 years, returned back to see the work that he had done in Ethiopia, not just in Addis Ababa, but in the country of Ethiopia. Billy had a tremendous impact in bringing lost souls to Jesus Christ. He and his wife, Mary, the wonderful mission work that they did in establishing churches, not only in Addis Ababa, but throughout Ethiopia. Billy had received word that other religions and other denominations had gotten to a point where they had come into the church buildings, into the worship facilities that our mission dollars had bought in terms of land, in terms of buildings, in terms of facilities. Other religions and other denominations had come in and literally taken control because their preachers were more schooled and skilled than our gospel preachers were. And so they were taking over people and property. And it caused alarm with Dr. Curl and for the churches that supported him, in particularly the Uptown Church in San Francisco, who was the sponsoring church for Billy for all of those years, and then churches throughout Southern California. And I was preaching at the time for the Compton Avenue Church in Los Angeles, and we were supporting those mission works, and news got to us. And Billy asked me to go with him over to Ethiopia for a couple of weeks to school, to educate, to train the brothers there, the ministers there who couldn't fly to America. They didn't have the resources to come over here to go to preaching schools or go to college or go to graduate schools to become efficient in the defending of the faith. So I went with Billy and was glad to do it. And this is what happened. We went over and then educated and trained those gospel preachers over a 2-year period of time. So we went in 1988 the first time, just Billy and I. And then in 1990 we had to go back. But this time accompanying us on the trip, in addition to Billy and myself, the late Dr. Reggie Doolin, and then 2 more gospel preachers, both in which all 3 of those are now deceased. Billy and I are the only ones still alive. And the 5 of us went over. We were headed to Addis Ababa, South Africa. But because in South Africa, apartheid was still in place, we could not fly directly from Miami. Of course, the 2 of us were living at the time in Los Angeles. But on the second trip, we flew from Los Angeles to Miami, where we picked up our other team. And because we could not fly directly to South Africa, 1999, because the apartheid regime was still in place and the United States had a ban on them, we ended up flying from Miami to Holland, and then we flew from there to Cape Town, South Africa. I want you to watch what happened. When we get to Cape Town, South Africa, We then get a connecting flight from Cape Town to Johannesburg, South Africa. And from Johannesburg, we would catch another connecting flight over to Addis Ababa. When we get to Johannesburg, there is a young lady from one of the South American countries who joined our flight. She was struggling with her luggage on the plane. Well, not only being gospel preachers, we were gentlemen. We assisted her with her luggage. She sat near us, so it gave us an opportunity to have conversations with her. We learned from conversations that she was going to Addis Ababa in order to be in a wedding, the matron of honor for a best friend of hers who had moved back to Africa, and she was going to be her matron of honor. Well, remember now, she catches the connecting flight in Johannesburg over to Addis Ababa. Now, when we get to Cape Town, South Africa, we had to present our passports. I've there, so we had to present our passports. A passport is something that your government gives you in order to pass through its ports. In other words, Secretary of State, we had applied for a passport from Secretary of State. He validated all of our information and granted us this passport so we can leave the United States and then return to the United States without any problems. And so when we landed, we simply presented to the authorities at the gate our passport. They opened up our passport, they saw our pictures, and then they stamped our passport, and then they said, "Welcome to South Africa." Now, we were headed eventually to Ethiopia, but our first stop for a few days, did some preaching there, and on over to Ethiopia. Now, I want you to watch what happened. Because we had already entered the country, we were free to fly for the most part through the rest of the continent. But we were headed to another country on the continent of Africa called Ethiopia. When we get to Johannesburg, this young lady joins us. It's a connecting flight for her. In fact, okay, long story short, she gets on the flight. We fly over to Ethiopia. When we get to Ethiopia, because it's a different country, we present again our passport. We go through the authorities, we go through immigration, they look at our pictures, they validate in their computer system that we are in fact citizens of the United States. We're not terrorists, we're citizens. And so, but then they ask for a second document called a visa. Now you ought to understand, I know some of you sitting there with Visa credit cards, but this Visa is not a credit card. In addition to applying to our own embassy, our own Secretary of State, our own government, who issued us a passport, they could not issue us a visa. You see, a visa is issued by the country of your destination, not the country of your origination. And so we had already applied to that embassy, and they had validated, they had given to us through the mail our visas. We get off the plane. We present our documentation, this time both our passport and our visas. They look at it. They said, "Welcome to Ethiopia." We had gone through immigration. Now we're over in the baggage department area, and we had assisted this young lady who joined the flight in the Johannesburg. So now we're waiting on her. We got some of her luggage. Our party is ready to leave. They've taken our luggage to their vehicles, and now we're being delayed because we have her, some of her luggage, some of her carry-ons. We asked Dr. Doolin to go around to check on her because, our party's here to pick us up and we need to leave. And they said, he goes around, he investigates the situation, and he says to us, "Listen, Barclay, take your bag." And there was another bag, and he had a bag. We need to take her bags back to immigration and give them to her. I said, "I don't understand what's going on." He says, "Dr. Barclay, she has a passport, but she does not have a visa." I said, "Well, how in the world did that happen?" Well, she said, he told us that she told him that the people back in her country told her all she needed to get in was a passport. She had a passport, but she didn't have a visa. Come here. They stopped her at the gate. They would not allow her to enter their country. Mind you, she paid for the ticket. She bought new clothes. She bought a wedding gown to wear to assist her best friend. She was on an honorable mission to stand with her best friend. But they stopped her at the gate. She paid the fare. She flew the flight. She put in the time. She got the immunization just like we received. But they stopped her at the gate. And they told her the first flight out of our country, leaving, going to anywhere else in the world, she was going to be on it. Oh, y'all missed your shout right through there. She was from South America. The first flight leaving was headed to China. Y'all missed your shout. She was from South America. The first flight leaving was headed to China. They said to her, "Depart from us. Baby girl, you on your own." Come here, friend. She was misled. She was deceived. She was not given proper information. And watch this. She could not make or demand changes at the gate because she did not have proper documentation. However honorable, however sincere she was, it made no difference. She did not have a visa. And a visa is given by the country of your destination, not the country of your origination. She heard some sad words. First flight out, you'll be on it. Whether that flight is going to your destination or not, you will be on it. You're leaving our country. What a sad day is going to be when you and I stand before the judgment seat of Christ, only to hear Christ say, "Depart from me. All that work you did is of iniquity." Oh, what a sad day that is going to be. Friends, I'm going to say to you tonight, and I will show it to you in the weeks to come, what the will of God is, what the righteous standard of God is, how you get into the kingdom of heaven. Jesus says, "Not everyone that said unto me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven." But watch this. "But he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven." Listen, don't you wait until it's too late to discover what the will of God is. Don't you wait until it is too late for you to understand the righteous standard that God requires for us to enter the kingdom. And that's what this entire sermon is all about. God's righteous standard for entering into the kingdom of God. And I will invite you to join us again next Wednesday night as we begin to unpack the righteous standard of God, that we can know the will of God so we can enter the kingdom of heaven. I know you'll want to join us. Please do. And until next Wednesday night, may the Lord of the harvest bless you, and may he bless you real good.